How's it going, guys? This week we're going to be taking a look at a specific exotic weapon, breaking it down to the best of my abilities, and then I'm going to be giving you one build per class to try and make the most out of it. That weapon, of course, you can tell by the thumbnail, is going to be Buried Bloodline, the exotic from the newest dungeon. It took a while for me to get, but I finally got it and its catalyst done, so we can full send some builds and hopefully you guys can find them useful and usable. So, like if you did find this helpful and informative, comment what you personally use with this weapon, and subscribe to come back and see more. And let's have a quick word from our sponsors, and let's get right into this. As I mentioned just a few seconds ago, we're going to be taking a look at Buried Bloodline, an exotic void special ammo sidearm. You get this exotic as a random drop at the end of the newest dungeon, Warlord's Ruin, and you get its catalyst by completing a series of puzzles and defeating a secret boss towards the end of the dungeon itself. It comes with the exotic trait Hungering Quarrel, double fire striking bolts, landing bolts, leeches health from a target. It also has the trait Violent Reanimation, multiple final blows with this weapon, grant Devour to the wielder, and a catalyst that gives it Split Vein lineage. While Devour is active, this weapon weakens on hits. With all these things combined, Buried Bloodline is a powerhouse with a lot of different builds, giving us Devour basically on any subclass we want, and allowing us to weaken targets with, again, being on any subclass we want. The leeching it gives is also very nice to have before we even activate Devour, allowing us to sustain ourselves even on larger, tankier targets like champions and bosses and mini-bosses and things of that like. Inside of PvP, this weapon has some very good tracking and has a very fast time to kill while inside its optimal range. Now, I'm not a huge PvP guy, so I don't know the exact numbers for these things, but I can tell that once you're used to this weapon, it is a very good option to use. I've had it used against me and I die extremely fast. So again, it's very good inside of PvP, but it's even better once you get used to that. I know I said that this weapon is good with non-void builds, and that part is still very, very true. But I like to lean into the identity of weapons that are given to us. So I will be pairing this with some void builds, and today we're going to be looking at 3 builds for Buried Bloodline. One for our Hunter, one for our Titan, and one for our Warlock. We're going to be going over the aspects and the fragments. We're going to be going over the exotics that I really enjoyed using with this weapon, and we're going to go over some of the really important mods you're going to want to run with this build. So let's start this off with our Warlocks. When looking at builds for Warlocks, when it came to this setup, I was stuck between 2 exotics. The first was Secant Filaments. This was one I was stuck on for a very long time, as this would allow us to drop an Empowering Rift, immediately get Devour, make all of our weapons anti-overload, and activate the Weaken from Split Vein lineage. But I decided that wasn't really the best thing, as Devour did get a nerf at the beginning of the season, and Healing Rifts overall are just better. So instead, I decided to go with Briar Binds, which comes with the exotic trait One with the Void. Your Void Souls have a longer duration. They also gain escalating damage and durability as they defeat targets. You can retrieve your Void Souls by interacting with them, allowing them to be redeployed. This is an extremely good exotic with any of our void builds, as it gives our Void Soul so much extra utility and allows us to deal out some good damage while also giving us our ability energy back when we run a Healing Rift. It can also activate Devour for us because it does count as an ability, which will help us get all the stuff for Buried Bloodline active before we even use the weapon itself, and it'll also weaken targets that it attaches to, making it a lot easier for us to get those final defeats. For the class setup, we're going to take Child of the Old Gods, as it is the focus of the exotic armor we're using. We have Feed the Void because, again, beginning of the season, Devour got nerfed, and this will help it along just that little bit extra, so it makes sense. For fragments, we're taking Echo of Starvation, so Orbs and Void Breaches give us Devour. Echo of Harvest, so when we defeat a weakened target, it will drop us both Orbs and a Void Breach. Echo of Undermining, so our grenades can weaken as well, and we have Echo of Instability, so we could spread around some extra volatile. Overall, I found that this particular setup was really fun, and with all the weakening that we can throw around with our Void Soul, our grenade, and our weapon, we were making orbs and void breaches constantly, giving us that constant devour, which would then feed back into the weakening. And volatile, the extra volatile, is always just so good to have for that extra ad clear. For Titans, this wasn't a very easy decision to make, mostly because a lot of the Void Titan exotic armor pieces already have a very set in stone playstyle. For example, Tunetank Pauldrons is very melee heavy forward, and I didn't want to just make another Heart of Inmost Light build, as while Heart of Inmost Light is really good, it's just boring. Everybody uses it, it's just boring. So I did some digging through the Titan exotic class of armor lists, whatever you want to call it, and I decided to pull out a mostly forgotten exotic, and that is going to be Mask of the Quiet One, which comes with the exotic trait Dreaded Visage, which grants ability energy when you're damaged, and when critically wounded, regain maximum health on kills. While our shields are active, which is when we have more than 70 HP, we're going to get 5% of our melee, our grenade, and our class ability back when we take damage. This does have a 1 second cooldown between activations, but with the ability to leech health from Buried Bloodline and the ability to activate Devour from Buried Bloodline, we're always going to meet the health requirements for Dreaded Visage, giving us the most out of our abilities when we are in combat taking damage. I will say, before we go over the class stuff, I found that it didn't work when we had a Void Overshield, so keep that in mind. For aspects, we're going to take Offensive Bulwark, so when we do have that Overshield for things like throwing our shield and hitting a target, we're going to get that passive grenade energy, and that's going to be really helpful. We're also going to take Controlled Demolition, so we can easily spread around Volatile for our fragments. And speaking of fragments, we are first going to take Echo of Starvation, of course, so when we pick up a Void Breach or an Orb, we get Devour activated. Echo of Cessation, so when we defeat a volatile target, they drop a Void Breach. Echo of Persistence, so our Void buffs last longer. And Echo of Instability, so we can spread around even more volatile. Overall, I found this build to actually be kind of surprising, as I didn't expect Mask of the Quiet One to really put in a lot of work, but because we're always at that health requirement, we're getting a lot of energy back, and it was actually really nice. For Hunters, it's a pretty easy choice. We're going to be taking the classic Gerfalcon's Halberg, which comes with the trait See Me, Feel Me. Your void weapons gain volatile rounds after you emerge from being invisible. When you are invisible and defeat a combatant while using a finisher, all of your weapons gain bonus damage. You and your nearby allies gain a reserve overshield and improved class ability regeneration. These reserve overshields can be deployed by using a class ability. This is the go-to for most, if not all, Void Hunter builds, and it is no exception here. This is going to give us free and easy volatile rounds for Buried Bloodline, which is going to make it a lot better in the long run. Plus, the exotic itself adds a little bit of support with those reserve overshields. For aspects, we're taking Vanishing Step so we can dodge, become visible, and set the whole thing off. We're then going to take Stylist Executioner, so when we defeat a Void debuff target, we can become invisible, and Void debuffs do include Weaken, which we're going to get from Buried Bloodline, and Volatile. For fragments, we're going to again start with Echo of Starvation, so when we pick up an Orb or a Void Breach, we get Devour. Echo of Cessation, so when we use a finisher, we make things volatile, and we can make void breaches from defeating those volatile targets. Echo of Persistence, so our void buffs last a little bit longer. And finally, Echo of Obscurity, so when we use a finisher, we can become invisible, just adding into that always wanting to be invisible playstyle to get those volatile rounds. Overall, this build is also really good. The free volatile rounds from Gerfalcon's Halberg make Buried Bloodline an absolute monster. Being able to always and constantly go invisible from either defeating a volatile target or a weakened target, or in most cases they're the same thing, is also really nice and adds to your own survivability, because usually, and how it should work, is you can't shoot what you can't see. When it comes to our armor mods, you are definitely going to want to take Harmonic Siphon, so Buried Bloodline can make orbs, help us feed into our fragments, and you're also going to want to take Special Ammo Finder, so we can always have ammo available to us for Buried Bloodline. After that, you can really take what you want. You can either take Kickstart mods to get your abilities back faster. I recommend Utility for our Warlock and our Hunter, and then if you want to use a Kickstart mod on our Titan, just take the Grenade Kickstart. Or you could rock out with Void Surges and deal that little bit of extra void damage, which is what I preferred on my Titan and what I did use on my Titan. But honestly, you can use whatever you want for this setup. That is the best part about this. If you want to make a very grenade forward Titan, use Grenade Kickstart. But that is the end of this video. This has actually probably been one of my favorite videos to make because I get to do 3 different builds and get to try out a few different formats for like the overall build overview and see how people like that. It's a nice little experiment. But I hope everybody enjoyed this video, found it informative. You got to take something from this and maybe make and use one of these builds to really give Barry Bloodline a good honest chance. Comment with what you've been using personally, or if you're going to use one of these builds in your own every day-to-day playstyle, and of course subscribe as it helps me out a ton, and this way you can keep coming back and seeing more. So I will see you guys in the next video.